Ritul, wonderful to be in your city, and thanks for coming by to see us. And very, very happy and pleased that you've been a member of Global Inca for these few years. How did you get to know about Global Inca, and how did your membership start for you?
Actually, it was through, I think, Jet Global Linker. I was connected with Global Linker. And it has been a great journey. I have been part of a lot of sessions in Global Linker.
Right.
And the best part is the way you link up with SMEs.
Right.
And the initiative that you take to solve the problems of SMEs.
Right.
That is what made me more connected with Global Linker.
Right.
And that is what made me feel a part and a family with Global Linker.
Thank you very much. We've actually enjoyed having you over, and a lot of SMEs have benefited from your wise counsel. So I think it's great to have a member like you on. Tell us about your own business, and what do you do, and how did you start what you've been doing?
Actually, I am a first generation chartered accountant.
Okay.
I started my practice back in 2002.
Right.
And we started basically, I focused my entire performance with working with associations, trade bodies,
right,
and business centric approach. And in 2003 I worked for like Rajasthan with this government association, and we got amendment in budget of 2003 when there was a excise duty implied from zero level.
Right.
By Jaswant Singh ji, and we got it bagged, and there was a benchmark limit of 30 lakhs which was introduced again.
Right.
So from 2003 to 2019 I have been working with the association, I have been working on tax laws.
Right.
And now we basically specialize into tax policy formation, and we help a lot of trade bodies, corporations in making better laws or improvising in laws. Even we suggest government on certain issues. So that is what we keep focus on.
So that's what keeps you so sharp and focused on the macro picture as well, but also be able to come down to a micro level as required for a business. How did you choose to be a chartered accountant, and what's your journey? You said you're a first generation, so this is not what your family did earlier.
Yeah. Right. So actually, it all started when I was very young.
Right.
And I was always fascinated by these share market really fascinated me. That was my first introduction to financial world.
Right.
And I was always interested in those ratios, price P ratio and net profit ratio. So when I was in 6th, I used to work on those ratios.
In the 6th standard?
In 6th standard.
Cool.
So that fascination for finance and those numbers, that crunched, and as I grew, and this was it came naturally with me. Right. So my family being from a jeweler's background, my dad was really disappointed when I said that I want to go into finance. So, but it's more of destiny and the passion which strikes what you are doing in your life.
No, I think if your passion can be your profession, there's nothing like it, and that probably shows in your enthusiasm and in your approach to business itself. How was the first break for you after you qualified? Did you go into an employment situation, or did you always get into practice?
1 year I worked with a CA firm.
Sure.
And then I started my own practice in 2002.
Right.
Fortunately, that year itself, Jaswant Singh ji, in 2003, I started in November 2002.
Okay.
And in 2003 budget, Jaswant Singh ji brought this new amendment that garments will be taxed under central excise from zero levels. So if a lady is cutting 4 ghagras in her house and she is going and selling it in the market, she has to get an excise registration. So that was a new law which was introduced in budget speech.
Right.
I was in that meeting in the Garment Association, and fortunately I was in that opportunity that they asked me, Acha, you help us.
Okay.
So I was just asked to help the association.
Sure.
But in the process of next 3 months, when we worked with the government and we represented to the government, I was so drowned in that entire process that became my profession, and that became the key activity I have been doing last 18 years.
So that was your initiation into representing trade bodies, putting, analyzing proposals from the government or enactments or laws,
making representations,
and then making representations on behalf of trade and body and all of that. So that's great. So that's almost baptism by fire in a sense, because you learned it the hard way by actually working on a live case. And thereafter, you've been associated with a number of trade organizations. What about commercial organizations outside of trade organizations? Do you have many clients as individual businesses?
Yeah, we work with a lot of companies like e-commerce companies we have been working with. We have even helped them in certain resolution of certain key issues. Then I have worked with telecom companies. Currently I am working with the government of Rajasthan on certain cases. Even government is facing certain tax cases, which are huge in numbers. So I am working with the government. And recently we have worked with income tax department, and we have built a software for income tax department for investigative intelligence. So we are the first CA firm which has made a software for income tax department for investigative intelligence, and we have launched in a short span of say 3 months. So
I don't know whether it's public knowledge at this point, but even if you just told us the logic of that, so what is this about? Is this to try and see trends and then be able to determine, or is this using GST data, for example, or to the extent you can share?
Actually, the government is having a lot of data.
Right.
So the data has never been a problem with the government. They have been collecting data from last 10 years, 15 years.
Right.
But how to use that data effectively? So what happens in India is, suppose the name is Ram Singh Meena, right? So he'll sometimes use Ram Meena, he'll use RS Meena, he'll use Meena Ram Singh.
Correct.
Then his father's name will be similarly used, then his address will be similarly used, he's having multiple addresses.
Right.
And most of the time PAN number was not used.
Correct.
So how to correlate that one person, all the transactions in different names, and different peripheries. Data was always there. So we have the department in that, and I think we have been pretty effective on that work.
Right. So Ritul, you talked about how you are passionate about helping SMEs, and what would your broader advice be to somebody who's maybe wanting to start a business, become an entrepreneur? What would your broader advice be to them?
See, there has been a trend of startups nowadays.
Right.
I strongly believe that burning money is not a startup.
Right.
Startup is all about an idea.
Correct.
So what is important is that you should first think of an idea and then think of burning money into it.
Sure.
Any business which does not have a business sense is not a business for me.
Right.
That may be a social service, but it cannot be a business.
Sure.
So whatever business you derive, it may have a gestation period which is say 3 years to 5 years, or even 10 years. In businesses like e-commerce, you may have a gestation of 10 years, but still you should have a profit model.
Right.
So if you intend to be in a business, then you should first think of how you'll make a profit out of it.
Right.
Next thing, be very compliant. Taxation is one thing which can really bring your business down.
Absolutely.
So what happens is, there are small issues which you may avoid initially, or you may try to take them lightly and just move over them. But after 5 years down the line, because things never die,
these come to haunt you later.
they are going to haunt you later, and then you will find that,
and they get magnified.
Yes.
Right. You're saying that maybe every 30-40 years business cycles change.
Yes.
We happen to be in the middle of one such period of cusp, where the old is giving way to the new. Existing businesses need to read this correctly. New businesses that are looking to come into business can look at this and seize an opportunity. Doing business today is very different from the way it was done traditionally, where you needed to be from a wealthy family, or you needed to have access to capital, you needed a lot of infrastructure, etc., which today is not necessary in the same way. But somebody who is open-minded, innovative and adaptive can gain from this stage of cusp, and before you know it, could end up becoming a fairly large-sized business or corporation in times to come. So these are exciting times as per you. You feel this is really a time when people need to reinvent themselves because the business order is changing. Is that a fair statement?
I would 100% agree with you. And that is what is happening today.
Right.
And plus there's one more point. Every day people come to my office and they say, we have got huge funds to invest. Can you tell us where we can put our money safely with a reasonable return? They are not expecting extra normal returns. So previously people used to come and say, if I'm doing business, I need minimum 18 to 24% of returns. They don't want 24% return. They just need a safe and systematic business and a growth opportunity. So this thought process gives an opportunity to people who don't have funds, but have the right idea. And forums like Global Linker, they will add lot of value for such people who can create ideas. They will have huge funds. They will have people who will be ready to invest into them. So that is one more thing I see for Global Linkers which is coming up.
Right. So the collaboration between unconnected partners now look and find those opportunities. First, decide what is the broad idea or area you might want to focus on, and then leverage the capabilities of platforms like what Global Linker is seeking to do. I think that's a great thought. Ritul, what are your what sectors are you most optimistic about in times to come? With the changing environment, where do you see pockets of opportunities that businesses should be looking at? What's your thought on that?
See, one segment is e-commerce, which I don't need to even explain, because everybody knows that e-commerce is the future.
Right.
The second sector is, I am strongly of an opinion that export is one market which is not tapped. I will not say under tapped, which is not yet tapped to the potential where it can reach.
Right.
So we need to be more cost effective.
Sure.
We need to take our product out of India.
Right.
We need to explore the world to sell our product. So that is one area which I think is good for our nation, and I think it's an untapped opportunity.
Right.
Untapped to an extent that we may go 10x from here in next 5 years. So if you think of making a 5 trillion economy, it is not possible without bringing our exports to that level.
Right. So the domestic market is large and it is there for the asking in a sense, but equally the ability to create a surplus and also look at export opportunities cross border is something people should be open to, because there's a lot of value that sits in that part. Sectorally, what do you think of either healthcare, education, automation, etc.? What are those sectors that you are seeing any trends on, or are there any that?
See, healthcare in principle is going to be, it's not going to be a mid segment. Healthcare is going to be either for the top end or for the bottom low. So bottom low, government is of the opinion that everything should go free.
Right.
So the people below the poverty line or who cannot afford, the government is absolutely of a mind that they will provide a complete healthcare free to them.
Right.
Then the mid segment, they will either go this side or that side. So in healthcare, if somebody wants to be, they have to be in the top notch.
Right.
They have to serve the best quality and the best product. So there they will get mileage. It will be more of a healthcare hospitality.
Right.
That is where I look healthcare sector as. Then we are talking about, like you said, education. Education, not education par itself, but allied activities like EdTech. Something which is related to technology, how you can link education to technology. That may be a business opportunity, but education itself is not a business opportunity.
So what I'm hearing you is more look for new generation opportunities to take the traditional business, build scale, automate where possible, and try and grow that, because that's where the opportunity seems to lie.
Yes.
Well, that's very helpful. Any other thoughts that you have for entrepreneurs? Because very often when we come into business, and I would be a classic example of that, we're not very sure of tax requirements, compliance, laws, and then how do we find our first chartered accountant to deal with, etc. Neither is your trade allowed to advertise or talk about it, which I think is good in some ways. But then how do people go about this? What are the selection criteria they must have in selecting a partner who will help them and guide them through this journey? So any thoughts for entrepreneurs and businesses on that?
With the little experience that I have this profession, if you are choosing a chartered accountant, choose a person who tells you what is right. Don't choose a person who tells you what suits you. So what happens is, if you have a person who tells you this is right, so in the longer run that is going to sustain.
So somebody who helps you interpret the law, the requirements, and tells you what is required to be done, rather than helps you get out of situations or tells you how you may be able to optimize, I'm calling it that, your tax liabilities that may be there, which means that could be a borderline advice. It may work for a period of time but may not be.
No, we may take calculated risks. So taxation is not a perfect law. It is evolving every day. There may be issues where there may be disputes. A lot of disputes is there. Even the government is not clear in a lot of aspects. So we have been fighting cases where both sides government is sitting. So government, if one side is there is a state government, the other side is a central government, we are fighting such cases. So what happens is, if the tax had been so clear, so there would not have been any litigation. What I believe is that you have to take a calculated, informed decision. So you might decide that what taxation you have to bear, what is the tax liability, but it has to be an informed decision based on knowledge and law, not based on your thought process. It should not be like that, I want it this way, so you tell me how the law becomes this way. It should be, law is this, these are the two interpretations, this interpretation has this merit, this demerit, this interpretation has this merit and this demerit, and now we choose and calculate the risk factor.
Right.
That is okay. But I should not be like that. The entrepreneur wants the law to be interpreted in a certain fashion, and I'll tell you ki this is the interpretation which is coming your way, because that may go in the short run but not in the longer.
So that would be your advice in choosing a tax, sort of associate or a chartered accountant. That would be the criteria one should be using. No, I think that's very helpful. Any advice to SMEs in closing and members of Global Link? Any suggestions or advice from you on how to manage and grow their business? I know you've provided a lot of inputs, but at an operational level, what are the things that they should really take care? What are the big traps people fall into from a tax perspective or otherwise? What would your advice be, especially in light of GST in particular?
Right. So what we tell our customer, the first day my customer to my office, I tell him that prepare a compliance chart.
Okay.
It's a single page chart,
right,
wherein we jot down months on the top.
Okay.
Then compliances beneath that income tax I've got these compliances, TDS I've got these compliances, GST I've got these compliances, all the laws, ESI, PF, everything.
Sure.
I even add your banking liabilities, like on these days I have to make the payment of my installments. So everything comes on this page, this side. Then there is a due date. Right. And the actual date of payment. What happens is, while running a business, what mistake an entrepreneur does is, he usually takes certain things for granted,
right,
which should not be taken. Sure. So there is a guy who is just looking forward, these are the compliances which have to be done over the period of time.
Right.
These are done on time. If not done on time, the entrepreneur, the guy who is managing, he has to inform the company or the management, these are the shortcomings or we are unable to comply.
Right.
So this way you can better manage your compliances.
Sure.
So I always believe in encapsulating all your dues,
right,
liability and compliances, and then performing accordingly.
I think that's a great tip, and I think it's a very pragmatic tip. We might actually take your help in creating some standardized charts, at least as a starting point.
We do
and then businesses can adapt it for themselves. But this would vary, I'm guessing, for manufacturing and trading and others, and by sectors as well. But at least there could be a basic minimum chart that could be used, and then people can build further and adapt to that. I think that will be a great help to SMEs in general. I personally see that as great value even to our own business, and I'm sure others will. Ritul, thank you very much for always being by the side of SMEs, always being there to lend a helping hand and to share your perspective. I hope we'll keep the conversation going, that I visit your city, but more importantly, we keep having this conversation where you can provide your help and advice to SMEs. Global Link has benefited by your membership, by your inclusion. A lot of you've become a very familiar name to a lot of members on Global Linker as a platform, but thank you for everything you do. It's wonderful meeting you over here, and all the very best for your efforts in trying to shape a lot of government policies the right way on behalf of trade bodies as well as sectors that you are focused on. All the very best to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you.